Hey, I hope everybody's doing well. This is SplineBomb's very first podcast. Today we're listening to a conversation I had with 20-year veteran Keith Sintay. Keith has worked on hugely popular films such as Mulan, Tarzan, Spirit, The Amazing Spider-Man, Transformers 2 and 3, Iron Man, and my personal favourite, Sursup, just to mention a few. He also mentors at Animation Mentor, which is where we met. He was my class 4 mentor. We hadn't seen each other in quite a while, so it was a real treat to catch up with him at CTN this year, and I'm excited to share our conversation about his time in animation with you guys. I hope you enjoy.
This is my first one.
Oh, is it? Your first podcast?
First podcast.
Can we say that on there?
Yeah.
Has it started?
It started this recording, but we can cut out bits and...
But I don't want you to cut out the bit about this being your very first podcast. I like being the first.
Okay. I like you being my first fan. I know you well enough. So you have a really interesting start in animation, and I found out about it online. I did my homework. Stalked you a little bit. So, do you want to tell us the thing about your sister and the hairdressers and...
Oh my God!
Yeah, I
did. That's hilarious. I don't usually tell that part of the story too much.
I love it though. I think it's really cool. So, tell us.
Well, basically, I was going to college like everybody else, and I was completely rudderless. I had no idea what I wanted to be or do. Even in spite of the fact that when I was a kid, I always wanted to make my own animated film, and I always knew how to draw, and I loved to draw, and but I didn't really know how to get started or anything like that. So I kind of abandoned that idea through high school and ended up just doing not much of anything.
Yeah, keep going.
As far as career-wise, where I should have been drawing the whole time. Well, anyway, come my my first year of college,
And what were you studying? Your business or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, marketing.
Don't get scared of how well I know you.
I could speak German. So I figured, well, I can pursue that and go into marketing or something. I had no idea what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So lo and behold, I lived in a dorm, and my they came at us with, we're going to print these T-shirts up for everybody on our floor, and we were known as the Terrace Rats because we lived on the terrace, which is like the lowest floor in the dorm. So I guess we were the Rats, whatever. That was the mascot. So
cool.
they presented us with this drawing, which I didn't think was very good, and I said, well, do you mind if I redrew this a little bit? So they said, sure, go ahead. So I redrew kind of the rat and redesigned it and did this whole thing, and it became so popular that other dorms and floors wanted me to do their artwork, and then it became sororities, and I started doing flyers for parties, and then eventually I started drawing for our school newspaper. And
cool. So comic strips or just...
Yeah, well, no, actually just illustrations to go along with stories.
Nice.
So like one panels and stuff like that, just artwork to accompany articles. And it worked out because, eventually somebody said, well, why are you studying this marketing when you should be, why aren't you going into art?
Yeah.
And at almost the same sort of time, my sister says, she sent me a book on, called The Illusion of Life, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. I'd never even heard of it at the time. She sends me this book because she was down there having just completed the college program from Michigan University. She went down to Disney World in Florida.
Oh, okay. She was working there or something, wasn't she?
Yeah. So she was already there, and I guess in one of the gift shops she saw The Illusion of Life or something. Well, anyway, the girl that cut her hair starts remarking after she had sent me this, remarks to her hairdresser saying, well, my brother, I just sent him this book, The Illusion of Life. He's really interested in drawing. He likes art. And then she says, the hairdresser says, oh, well, my husband's an animator. He should write to my husband to find out.
Fate.
It was amazing. His name is Rob Corley. And
so he gave you your start? He got you?
Well, basically, I wrote to him, and I said, well, what do I need to do to get into this animation thing? And he said, well, you need a portfolio. And I really didn't even know what a portfolio was. I was so ignorant. It's unbelievable now. But, yeah, so I learned to draw, and I would send him, drawings. Unfortunately, back then, there was no internet. You couldn't just scan anything. You actually physically had to Xerox it and mail it.
Mm-hmm. What did you send him, though? Like that with?
Well, I didn't know what a figure drawing was compared
did you know
to
you
a
had
gesture
to do
drawing. No, well, he told me, he said you need to send drawings of people and try and get into anatomy classes and figure drawing classes. So I started doing that, and eventually I came up with enough good drawings after submitting them to Disney, because they used to do their internship in Florida at the time. And it took me 4 rejections over the course of a couple of years. Yeah,
I'm sorry, but that's encouraging.
It is. If I would have given up, but that's the only thing I wanted to do was to animate. And once I figured this out, that I could actually do this for a living,
that was it.
It became huge. Well, there was a time, actually, before I met Rob, or before I never even met him face-to-face, but just did correspondence with him. I don't even know if I ever talked to him on the phone. But,
really?
Yeah.
Not even when you worked there?
No, well, yeah, when I finished him. But that was up in Michigan, across the country. My sister was down there with him. Well, actually not with him, but knew the hairdresser. That's the. But for me, it was just mail correspondence. You know, snail mails.
Mail, writing. Oh my God.
No email back then. No, this was years ago. So anyway, what happened was I actually called up Disney in California from Michigan and said, how do I become an animator? Because I just found their number in the phone book.
So you called the reception?
Yep, just physically just called Disney and said, I want to be an animator. What I have to do is they put me through to some different places, and they finally said, well, you need to have I think she said graphic arts degree or a design degree, some kind of degrees. I'm like, okay. And they said, you need to send a portfolio. And still, at that point I didn't know.
Yeah.
After I talked to Rob and he explained it to me,
that's cool. That's cool.
I kind of knew what to do. And then from then on, it just became playing catch-up for me to learn to draw, as well as I could, studying anatomy and just becoming better than the thousands of people that were applying at the time. Because literally I asked them, I said, how many portfolios are you folks getting? And they said they were getting about 2,000 portfolios every couple of months.
They probably get more now. Huh?
And of them, well, nobody sends a portfolio anymore because it's not traditional animation.
Stuff,
Yeah, but back then it was just drawing, and they were getting some thousands and of those they were only taking maybe 11 to 15 people out of the 2,000, 4,000 portfolios. They were taking 11 people to actually bring into the internship. And then you weren't still guaranteed a job. You still had to prove yourself, which luckily I did, and I was hired to work on Pocahontas. So that was the beginning. And back then, one thing about today, of course, there's so many outlets for animation. You have, there's more commercial stuff. There's video games, of course, which we really didn't have that sort of thing. I mean, we had video games, but you can't count like Pac-Man and that sort of stuff. But you had to be able to draw if you were going to animate. There was just no way around it.
Yeah.
But nowadays, obviously, with computer animation, you don't really need to.
So over the 4 tries, how many years was that, or how many months? Or?
It was about 2 years.
2 years.
I probably applied, like once in the summer and then once in the winter, and then again in the summer, again in the winter. And my fourth time, the third time, they had called. I actually got a call from Jack Bell, who was the call that you wanted, and he left a message. He said, "Hi Keith, this is Jack Bell from Walt Disney Feature Animation. If you call us back." Yeah, and I lost my mind, so I called back, and they said, "Well, you're the alternate. So that means if somebody drops off, you're next."
Oh, that's so...
I got bumped because of somebody that they were just training on a charity thing. Somebody from UNICEF, believe it or not, they brought in so they could do some kind of commercials for UNICEF. So I got bounced, but the very next time I got in.
Well, that's cool.
So it was tough.
It's encouraging, but it's heartbreaking when you're like, you're almost there, and I'm like, no.
Yeah, for me it wasn't easy to get in, but I fought hard and I did it.
That's cool. So I've seen photos of you at Disney on Facebook and stuff like that, and you look really, really young.
What do I look like now?
Well, no, you look young now, but you look really young then. I mean, it was really the 80s and the mad hair, not you, but the girls around you and stuff like that. Was it intimidating to be at that young age around all that major talent?
Well, here's the thing. What was weird was when I was a kid, I could draw better than all my friends.
Yeah.
There's just you can't do this professionally and not be naturally talented at it. And then when I went to school, I was usually the best in the class. When I was in college, you become the best in your class, and you want to be the best in the school. So you become the best in your school, and you're like and I just really. But then you get to Disney, and you realize everybody's the best in their school.
Yeah. And
it was completely humbling. I walked in there with such an attitude that I was just the best, and then I realized that I was just not even close. And it really, what's great about it is it pushes you to be even better, and you realize that you're not even near your potential.
Yeah.
Not even close. But every day you get challenged and more. And it's unfortunate now that they don't do that, traditional animation anymore, because it was so tactile and hands-on. The figure drawing classes every week.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of studios still encourage that, but it was mandatory.
That's cool.
So
I was wondering what the program was like back then and how it was making your way up the ranks, because it seemed like, from what I gather on your IMDb or whatever it is, you went in and Pocahontas as a cleanup artist or something, and then you, within the one movie you were an in-betweener, and then you went to an animator. It all seemed really, really fast. Really fast.
it wasn't that fast. It was
movie
difficult, but
movie.
yeah. Usually what happens is you start out as a cleanup artist. Basically that was taking new sheets of paper and putting it over the rough drawings from animation and drawing a final line. In fact, at DreamWorks they called it final line instead of cleanup. So you would do that, and the various, you were in betweener, and then there was like an assistant, and you moved through those. But then going into rough animation, basically it was up to you to push yourself out of cleanup and get into, because not everybody either wanted to leave cleanup or had the skills to get out of cleanup. You had to do tests, and so we would spend our free time whenever we could working on our own time, developing a dialogue test and animating to that, and working with a mentor. My mentor was a guy named Elliot Bohr, and he helped me tremendously throughout my whole beginning of my career in traditional animation. He'd sit down at my desk, and he'd look and he'd go, okay, look at my drawing, and the first thing he'd say was, okay, where's the clean paper? It was like this crushing. It became a joke between us, but still, it was like, oh man,
come on. He comes in your room, hand him a sheet of clean paper.
No, it was a big stack of clean paper, and he would just put it right over my drawing and show me how I was supposed to draw it. So it's just the way, it's the way you learn.
But you moved pretty fast, though.
Yeah, it became. I remember one time my parents were visiting in Florida, and I felt bad because the board review was going to be the next day or something like that. So I didn't see my parents, even though they were visiting from across the country.
Yeah.
I stayed at the studio that night by myself, just working on this to get this test done, because I knew the review board was coming up.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I was so committed to it.
Did you work on specific characters over those? Did you get to work on Tarzan himself?
Yeah. Unlike CG animation, traditional animation, you are assigned a character, because it's a lot harder to draw so many different characters and know to draw them well.
Right.
So you were assigned and put on a team. Like on Pocahontas, I worked on the Pocahontas team.
Oh, cool.
Drew her, and then Mulan, I drew the Mulan. Eventually, I was moved on to, or I changed over to work on the ancestors and the Gang of Three, mostly Yao.
Were you working under Mark Hamill for one of those?
Yeah, Mark Hen was Mulan.
Mulan.
Yeah, he was the head guy. In fact, if you look at Mulan's ear, much like Glenn drew a G in Pocahontas' ear, Mark drew an H. If you look at Mulan's ear, you'll see an H in there.
Very cool.
Yeah, Mark's great. Really nice guy.
Yeah. So how do you feel from a personal standpoint about getting just one character to work on versus working on every character in the film? Or have you had that experience of working on every character in the film?
I was lucky because I got to work on a lot of the title characters, which was fun.
Yeah.
But, like on Mulan, I would have done more of the dragon, Mushu.
Oh, I love him.
Yeah, I think I did maybe one shot.
Tell us the shot. One of your favorite shots, even if it's not a Mushu shot.
Well, in Mulan, I worked a lot on her cutting her hair.
Oh, nice. Really?
All the sad,
all
the emotional stuff.
Yeah.
In fact, when I was still in training, they were working on Lion King, and Elliot let me do some drawings in the sequence where Simba's trying to wake up Mufasa.
Oh.
He's climbing underneath his paw and trying to wake him up, and I was like, wow, this, I could say that's the very, very first thing I ever did.
What?
Even though it was probably technically I wasn't supposed to be doing that. But I was sort of taking over his. He just let me sit in his chair and do some drawings for him. So
nice, very nice.
But it was fun. And
were you crying doing that? Because I find when I'm doing cell animation, I get really sad myself. I'd be like, ooh.
No, I just didn't want to screw it up. I'm trying to think if there's any I mean, there's. I like to. You asked if you know what it's like to draw one character compared to like CG where you do so many.
Yeah.
It's weird because during the transition at DreamWorks from everybody was still trying to learn going from traditional animation to CG, and there was so many. It was such a. What do I want to say? It was such an unknown. How do these animators become CG animators? So they had a lot of crutches and things that they developed.
Like
they actually had a timing chart, believe it or not. If you know what a traditional hand-drawn timing chart looks like with the slashes and up in the upper right corner of an animation drawing, you'll see that with this numbered, and it looks like a little I don't know what you'd call it. It has little tick marks on it. Well, anyway. They actually developed a plug-in or a script or something that we could bring into Maya and actually see that in there, and then you could do your timing using that thing, hit a button, and it would run this script that would automatically put things on halves or thirds like we used to do for traditional animation. It seems insane now.
How you mean?
In fact, I think they might still use it at Disney or DreamWorks. I'm not sure.
Hang on, explain this to me. So you put your character, like your CG character in.
If you ever CG animation, you do all your key poses. Let's say.
Okay, like in columns, like Doctor does. You just key everything on frame 1, then key everything on frame 2.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then you have your little timing chart thing.
Crazy.
And then you say, okay, I want it to look like, and you set up your timing chart. With the card. I know, and you hit the button, and all of a sudden it spreads them out, and it automatically. It was so. I would never work that way today. It was so crazy, but it was a complete crutch for us to use.
I actually find that kind of fascinating.
It was developed by a couple people at Disney, and they brought it over to DreamWorks. Like I said, who knows? Maybe somebody's still using it out there somewhere, but I would not recommend it.
Well, I don't know. I'd love to try it because I find that those tools in CG tend to take out the animation aspect of it, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, Twin Machine or something, no offense to whoever created that, but it's taken away me doing the whole, in-betweens and everything. But you're still doing your own timing, so you don't like it, no? It's hell?
It was not, it did not help a whole lot. But what I was going to say is we were trying to do this, we had this big learning curve to go between what was traditional animation and learning CG. So that was one of the crutches that they came up with. And then the other thing is they still wanted everybody just to draw one character or to animate one character.
Yeah.
So, for example, I would animate Angie in a shot that had Angie, and Angie was the angelfish. And then
we're talking about
Shark Tail. And then not Sebastian, what's his name? Oscar was the little yellow fish. If they were in the same scene together, I would animate one, and somebody down the hallway would be animating the other, just like we would do in traditional animation, which seems insane again now because I would just animate both of them, but we didn't know, nobody knew what they were doing then, so it was a very weird time.
Interesting. So, on the same note as spacing and timing out your work, you have a remarkable understanding of spacing and timing. Like, the way you went over your students' work, I've been keeping an eye on your critiques and stuff like that. You just seem to do it straight ahead, and you're like, blah, 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 blah. And I'm thinking, that's not going to work out. He's going to say, well, you get the idea. But it's gorgeous. It's always, even though it's rough, super rough, but your timing and spacing is always on mark. And I'm wondering who taught you that? Is it something you learned at Disney? Or, somebody that sat you down and said, this, because you didn't even go to,
you make a conscious effort to learn timing by actually timing things out, and you can take a stopwatch and do it. But after years and years of doing it, you kind of know ahead of time what's going to look right. And I have a feeling you develop a sixth sense for, an eighth of a second. I know how long that feels. I know how long I know how long 3 frames is compared to 6 frames even. It just you work so long in these using these micro units of time that it becomes kind of a second nature, and you can kind of feel it. But I did take a class, timing for animation, because I wanted to go back. No, actually I took it at, I can't remember, Los Angeles Animation Academy. I don't know, it was some school here when I first came out from Florida. I moved out here when I was at DreamWorks, and I knew that I could go to the down shooter and throw my drawings down and then snap, take their picture, and then use the timing, software and just hit a 6, and that would be help for 6, that would be help for 4. And it was such a cheat because I knew I could look at my drawings playing back after I'd set their timing in the computer, where I should have done it at my desk and known ahead of time, this is going to be help for 4, this is going to be help for 2, this is going to be help for whatever. So I was kind of doing, and I felt bad. I was like I was cheating, even though a lot of people didn't think that way, and they thought, well, I can just work on my timing on the computer.
Yeah.
And this is all traditional animation, by the way, not CG. So, but I wanted to learn it the right way, so I actually did take a course called Timing for Animation, where we took stopwatches, animation stopwatches, which they used to sell. I don't know if you can get them from Cartoon Color anymore. But anyway, and you learn how long a head turn will take, or how long does it take to reach out and pull a banana from a pile, or to bend over and pick something up, and then you time it on this thing and you say, oh, that took 46 frames. I could almost tell you how many frames it's going to take.
Yeah.
Just from doing this so long.
Was anybody notable teaching that class? Can't remember. It's a long time ago. I'm making you feel old. I'm sorry.
No, his name was just brought up to me recently. It was funny because we were talking about it. I'll try and remember for you.
Okay. Well, we can come back to it.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, that's cool.
You can put it in the notes.
Yeah. So what was your most fun experience on a film? What made it so enjoyable as well?
Wow. Everything. Everything. They're all different. I think...
It's like talking about your favorite kid, isn't it?
Kind of, sort of, but it's in a different way. It's like, it's watching each kid graduate.
Yeah.
And, this one's going to become an astronaut, and this one's going to become a major league ball player, or whatever. And for me, of course, sitting down the first time and realizing that everybody that's ever going to see this movie is going to see my drawings.
Yeah, that's
and Pocahontas, for example, the first thing I really worked on was just amazing to me. I'm like, I can't. And I look at, and I would sit there for the longest time and I couldn't even. I was so excited I couldn't even hardly sit still. And I would look over at my friends, and they would be drawing, from a similar or the same scene, because we were doing cleanup animation at that time. And I'm thinking, my God, we're all working on this thing that millions of people are going to see for years and years, and it just became epic to me. I just loved that.
Yeah.
And then eventually there's other things that I love. Like I told you, I love animals, so drawing. Like when I started at DreamWorks on Spirit, the first 3 months of the movie, we weren't even in the studio. We were at the Equestrian Center. We had Dr. Deb from the Smithsonian teaching us about anatomy of horses, and we had Stuart Smeda, who's an expert in comparative anatomy, talking about why the bones are shaped the way they are. Dr. Deb talking about, if a horse steps on a piece of wood compared to a piece of rock or granite, or if it's something straight, or why do their ears go back, or why does the tail come up, so learning that stuff for me was so enjoyable, and then actually physically getting better at drawing horses, which I've always wanted to do. It's funny, you try and draw a horse from the side one time, but then for that movie, we had to draw horses from the top, the bottom, 1,000 times over.
So you could really see, like, you draw a horse with not doing any of that stuff, and then you draw a horse after doing all that stuff.
Yeah, acting and behaving and jumping and...
Good God.
It was tremendous fun. So that was a huge challenge. And then there's, other ones that are more fun, like I liked working on Surf's Up.
My favorite movie!
That was tremendous fun, yeah.
Okay, I can't say my favorite movie, but it is way, way, way up there.
The challenge of
way up there.
Of making those little characters look like they were on surfboards and carving up the water was its own fun. Transformers was fun because of the whole aspect of that, that puzzle, trying to figure out how to make those things look like they're, spinning and turning into...
That was incredible.
From,
incredible.
Machines into, robots into cars or whatever.
I'm a girl, I probably shouldn't love Transformers, but that's, like, really one of my favorite movies. It just looks incredible.
Yeah. And then, of course, I'm working on, like, something like Iron Man or Tron. I don't know. They all have their own weird things that I love about them. So it's just the challenge for me. And people, I don't know if you're going to ask this question or not, but
stop looking at the question.
I can't see it from here.
Oh, sorry.
Honestly, I can't. No, I just embarrassing enough. My eyes aren't that good. So no, what I was going to say is that what was I going to say? Now I got to rewind it.
No, it's okay. We can cut it all out.
I was going to say that We were talking about I forgot. I was doing so good.
Well, hang on. We can stop. Well, no, let's take it a really long time to play it forward again.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
We can come back to it. It's no problem. Okay. Along the same lines of we're just there talking about 2D and 3D and so on. You personally, how did that happen for you? Did you decide you wanted to go into 3D, or was it forced upon you? Like, 2D just ended, and you just ended up having to go?
Was
it something you wanted to do?
Death of 2D. See, that's what this leads right in.
Don't say that. I don't believe.
This was. You're gonna make me forget what I was gonna say again.
I'm sorry.
Don't do this to me. I just remembered what I was gonna say, and you're gonna make me forget again.
Sorry.
The whole thing about animation with me. Because people always ask this question, because I've been in the rare position of being a traditional animator and a CG animator, is do I miss drawing? Would I rather go back to drawing?
Yeah.
And I always have an answer in that, for me it was the means to an end to be able to draw and create characters that looked alive. So just taking something that's inanimate, making it look alive, whether it's a puppet or a CG model or a drawing, and then you create this to, pull the phrase, this illusion of life from this thing was the magic for me.
Yeah.
And so...
it doesn't matter, huh?
Yeah, and I still draw all the time, even though I do CG. I draw on my own time, or I do storyboarding for other... Yeah, storyboarding or character design or whatever.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So would you...
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. We didn't actually answer your question, though. Was I forced into it?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's one
Because one day... we're at DreamWorks, and then all of a sudden, I can't remember how it exactly happened, but I just saw it all happening around me, especially because Disney was right down the street, and they had their big announcement that they were going to be finishing, I think, what was their last one? The one about the farm?
Home on the Range?
Yeah, Home on the Range. I think it was their last one, yeah. So, and then Jeffrey Katzenberg, I swear it seemed like within the span of 2 weeks, it went from, we have this great new thing, Spirit's done great, we have this, it's called Tradigital.
Okay.
We have traditional mixed with digital, and it's the state of the art, and it's going to be the future, and then 2 weeks later, all the big bulletin boards in the hallways were coming down with the artwork of films that had been canceled that were going to be traditional. There's one about, it was I think Moby Dick was one of them. And,
yeah?
Yeah, whales and stuff like that. It was going to be traditional drawn. And, and they said, here's the thing, we're going to take a handful of you and move you into CG. We're going to go right into training, which luckily I was in that boat.
That's good.
Some people, they said, we're going to have you take a test and see if you can...
Do it?
Yep. And then other people they said goodbye to. So I was fortunate to be pulled into the first group, and I learned, they basically taught us all CG so that we could go on to Shark Tale.
Did you enjoy it? Did you think this is a good challenge, or did you
Nope, I loved it.
Yeah?
Yep. I was already poking around with it back when I was at Disney with Maya, just doing the tutorials, and this is,
Yeah, Maya must have been...
You have to remember, yeah, exactly. You have to remember, this is not the Maya of today. Anybody listening to this, this was literally not anything like Maya is now, and I don't even know if I would recognize it, but yeah, it was just, you could go down to the lab at Disney, which nobody ever did. There was nobody ever there except me and maybe one other person sometimes. Nobody teaching anything. This was at Disney. And I would just go in there and, I think I made a model of I did that tutorial with the seal bouncing a ball on his nose or something. That was one of the tutorials. And I never touched it since then. And then years, maybe 3 or 4 years later, 5 years later, was when they said, okay, we're going to take you in and train you guys. And we did the whole training thing where we had to, throw the bouncing ball and then a bipedal walk, and then we had this the Sinbad, and we had Sinbad characters to use and do just tests with and whatnot, and then we were thrown right onto Shark Tale, and everybody stared at each other and said, how do we do this? And there was maybe 3 people that weren't traditional animators, that were just CG animators, but once we caught up and figured out what was going on, and for me, I always tell when I'm teaching animation or whatever, it's about workflow. And once I figured out my workflow, it was it was game on. I was just as comfortable doing it in CG as drawing. So.
How long did it take you to catch up?
A movie and a half.
Movie and a half? Which is how many years?
I faked my way through Shark Tale and halfway through Open Season.
Did you do anything like drawing, having a sheet of celluloid over
it
and
was
drawing?
brutal. No, I just fought my way through the graph editor. It was
Keys
just
everywhere.
completely, just crap because, they didn't have schools that were specific for CG animation like they do now. iAnimate, Animation Mentor, those type of things. And it was just us trying to teach each other and learn from each other. And so I saw two guys, one of them named Steve Gordon, I think might still be at DreamWorks, and then another guy I say still at DreamWorks, but when I met him he was at Sony. And another guy who was a traditional animator, and another guy that was a traditional animator who I can't think of his name, but those two guys were doing such amazing CG animation. I was like, how are they? So I literally walked over to them and I said, please show me step by step what you're doing.
Yeah.
And one of the things they weren't doing was looking at that graph editor. They said, one of the guys never even opened. He just did all of his work in the, in the workspace. Yep. Yeah. Did his timing down on the thing, which is what I do today.
Yeah.
And never bothered with, tangent handles and all that crap. And just literally, just like you're drawing it, created every frame, by hand. Didn't let the computer do overshoots. Didn't let the computer do arcs.
You actually animated on one?
Pretty much, probably, yeah. One of the guys did. And then Steve did a similar thing, but just, it was the fact that I could get away from, going from stepped, whatever, to whatever this thing was called, linear, and I changed it to, and then into spline, where everything turned into soup, and that whole nightmare, and then having to go back into the graph editor, tighten up tangents, and pull in overshoots, and all that crap that I had no idea what I was doing.
Thank God for auto tangent these days. Saved my life.
Yeah, well, so now I have a whole system that I am glad to teach and show it to other people that streamlines everything, makes it super fast, and your animation is snappy and rock solid. So
we'll get into workflow. Remind me if I forget. But I do want to ask you, that like animating on ones, isn't that with the curve is obviously going crazy? In between those frames. Do you know what I mean? He hasn't gone into the graph editor at all. So when you put in motion blur and all that kind of stuff, doesn't that jack it up?
Oh, I see. Well, no, because what you're doing is you're constantly... He's probably not starting in frame 1 and then going to frame 2 and then frame 3. You go to frame 1 and then frame 9, and you scrub back and forth. And you can see that nothing's spinning or Euler problems or anything like that.
Okay.
I can't say for sure because, that was...
I have to go search him out and ask him.
Years ago.
Okay, so would you analyze your video reference differently from 2D as opposed to 3D? And more realistic versus cartoony? So, do you know what I mean? Would you take more, stick more closely to it if it was realistic animation and then less closely to it if it was cartoony? Or would it make a difference if it was 3D or 2D?
Well, the video reference?
Yeah, do you use video reference?
Yeah. Basically, I would approach video reference the same way if I was doing it traditionally or CG. If I have a prop in the scene and I try and find something to approximate the prop, and then because when people try and pantomime a prop, they're doomed because there's no weight, there's no reaction to it. And so you have that, but then when I go to analyze the vidref, I usually draw thumbnails from it, and I'll take my key positions, which basically is any time there's a change of direction.
Yeah.
So if the character's doing anything, if one part of the body's moving and then in the opposite direction or changing direction, then I'll draw maybe a key for that. And then I'll go through and get as many of those down as I can, and which was the same thing I would have done for traditional animation, so I'll do it for CG. And then...
that's very old school kind of way of doing it.
Yeah, and then as far as, cartoony versus realistic, once you have, basically if I'm shooting video reference, I try not to get too cartoony in my motion.
Yeah.
You want to do that in your animation and exaggerate it, but, or caricature it. And maybe sometimes I'll take the vidref, and then when I'm doing my thumbnails, I'll caricature it in my thumbnails. It just, depends. I remember, going in, and a lot of times it's just about really making those 2 or 3 key poses the strongest.
Yeah.
And I would draw those full size, not even thumbnail them. I would just my thumbnails would be just, almost a full size drawing. But when you're doing something more realistic like Iron Man, it becomes a thing. I'm trying to think. Like there was a shot where he had to he gets buried in all this rubble or whatever, and he punches his way from underneath the water out of this stuff, and I actually had to shoot Vidra for the arm because I couldn't figure out which angle looked good to come up out of it. So I was on one side of a conference table, my friend was shooting it from the other, and I pushed my arm up like I was pushing it through the debris or whatever he was having to do, and what looked best, because they wanted some sort of, they didn't want it to look like a zombie arm, they wanted it to look like a, so it was this whole thing. I'm like, I can't believe I have to shoot reference for an arm, but I ended up doing that, and it really paid off because I was able to get, I could see what worked and what didn't, for one thing, but also timing-wise, I could see how fast it should come out and that sort of thing, but as far as like a walk or that needs to be super hyper-realistic, like in Iron Man or anytime you're doing a digit-double thing, and it has to look photoreal, that's a matter of... The digit-double is basically when you see Iron Man in the suit walking, even if his lid is up, it's a CG character, CG element. It's basically a double for the what you would think would be a real practical suit on set or whatever, or a real person. It could be anything from a stuntman falling off of a building, that could be a digit double, or whatever. But that was the thing about Iron Man that always amazed me, is the fact that anytime you see that suit on him, he's not really even wearing it at all.
Oh yeah, it's really weird.
Yeah, it's crazy. But like all the walks, because this is the first one of all 3 Iron Man movies that he actually walks around in the suit. In the other ones, he's just standing there.
Yeah.
So he had to come up with this walk.
I was going to ask, how did you do that? Like, because did you get reference of a guy in a really heavy suit?
No, we tried all kinds of things, and it just became a matter of personal taste after a while, because Robert Downey Jr. would be in the shot and he would walk with the swagger, and they didn't want the swagger because it looked weird in the suit, because he had this suit that weighs as much as a car, supposedly, so it can't have that swagger. So we had to, we would maybe start with looking at him walking, and then dial it down and dial it down. Eventually we just had to abandon all of the swagger and come up with something that had very little hip rotation and very little shoulder rotation. It becomes almost like very mechanical and robotic, obviously.
Did you guys look at RoboCop?
No, I don't know if we looked at RoboCop. We probably looked at a few different things, and we definitely, in our minds knew, kind of what we wanted, but it took a long time to get there, because we started with trying to just dial back the swagger, and it just, because we started with it, and then they're like last.
Yeah.
Whereas if we could just done it from scratch and said, well, this is just going to be, which is eventually what we ended up with. So that was actually tricky, way harder to do that than flying.
Yeah?
Flying, fighting, rolling, tumbling, punching, easy stuff. Having him walk like in the living room across that tile floor was a nightmare. It was funny too, because since I worked on Transformers, I got to do the Transformer type of shots, where his suit peels off of him and does all that stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, I did all those shots. It was fun.
I find them fascinating. How, in the name of God, does a rig work like that?
I got to tell the rigger exactly what I needed. They broke it up into they carve it up, they cut it into the pieces, and I said, this is where I want this piece and this piece, and I want the pivots to be here. Group these pieces together. So basically, I color-coded everything on the suit, and I went through literally, physically, and grabbed all the mesh pieces, which had already been broken up, and I grouped them. Like, I want this section, everything that's green is going to be controlled.
Well, I know, but explain it for the guys.
Yeah, and then, in this section, yellow will all be controlled by one controller, and this section is... So it took probably about 2 days just to do that for me, and then the rigger put it together and rigged it, and then it was a little bit of back and forth, and then just animating it was weird. We had 2 different suits. There was one that could cut apart, and then the other one, and the two had to blend together. So that one frame where it blends, there was a lot of cheating going on. The same thing with Transformers. It's the same exact thing. You get to a point where the car can pull apart so far.
Yeah.
The robot can fold down towards the car so far.
Okay.
They can't they're not
all
really
the way.
designed. No, it's a complete cheat. So if you ever watch those, those movies, there's always something. There's a spin. There's something going on where there's a blur or something. But when that moment in Iron Man 3 when he's walking, and that girl comes to visit him, and he walks in, and Pepper drops the bags, and then he's about to step out of the suit. There's one frame that there was no hiding. There was no way to cheat it. So I found a frame that looked like we could use it, and then so I did the animation of him walking in one suit, one CG model, and then the other one, which had his head tracked, so it's just his face moving around in this thing, and then when he steps out of the suit, that's the other model when it comes apart and folds and everything, and then I guess during that I tried to come as close as I could, just really pixel effing the shot to try to make everything line up so perfectly.
Wow.
If you remember the movie too, when she's flying backwards and the suit starts to come up onto her, that was actually another suit. We had 3 or 4 suits for that stuff, and that was another one that everything had to fold together.
This Iron Man
3. Yeah.
When I'm talking about Toy Story, I keep saying Toy Story 4 because I want Toy Story 4 to come out. So I was thinking, is it Iron Man 4 or is it Iron Man 3? Okay.
Not yet.
Hopefully. Oh, it's awesome. I love those movies. So do you feel like the 2D background really gave you an edge? Things that you might think about the eyes or something like that. When a character's looking down, you kind of scale the eyes a little bit, and you pose the hands nicely in 2D more than you would in 3D. Do you feel like that adds a certain level of appeal to your work? Do you know what I mean?
I definitely do. I think anyone that's studied traditional animation, and everybody that's currently doing CG should study traditional animation and really understand the principles. But definitely appeal is huge, and that comes along with silhouette and the line of action, the whole gesture, how you pose the hands. Because I know a lot of people when they're putting together their shots or whatever, they'll leave the hands till last. And that's one of the first things you do is pose the hand out of the static, rigged pose. Yeah, karate hands, my friend's son calls them.
They're so frustrating to see. The first thing that they call your attention, and you can't see the rest of it.
And if that's the last thing they touch, a lot of times it gets neglected. A lot of only CG people will do that, and I could name a couple of movies that's so evident on it. It was so frustrating.
The hands aren't really touched.
Yeah, and the way the shoulders a lot of times don't get touched, or things like that. And those are the first things you want to hit to make it look like a human or a living creature.
I was at one of the talks, and Ted T was saying, you don't go in 2D saying, I'll draw the head and I'll do the neck later. It's the same thing in CG. You don't really, you should do everything.
Yeah, definitely. At least on your very first frame, pose it all.
Yeah, comfortably and realistically.
Pause that for just a second. I'm just going to roll the window down and see how loud it is. Like I said, when it comes to posing, yes. When it comes to line of action, yes. There's sometimes, on my screen physically, I'll take my dry erase marker and draw the pose that I want. Because trying to pull that CG model into, having the organic feeling, especially in the spine that I need, can be, more difficult. And I'll never push it as far as I really need to. Like in the gesture, if you've ever looked at, not Glenn Villepeu, Walt Stanchfield's notes, and he shows you how to push the pose, especially the gesture. And a lot of times with a CG model, you really won't push it as far as you think it, it should be. So I'll actually physically just draw the, how I think the character should be.
Yeah. Well, that's cool.
So that helps a lot.
Yeah. So you've been around a few studios now, and I was wondering if you still get interviewed. Do people call you? And if you do get interviewed, what questions come up?
Yeah. You mean interviewed for, because I was just interviewed for a book. Talking about that kind of stuff?
You do books, because I was looking up your wiki as well.
Students will interview me for their, if they're working on something.
Stuff
Job interviews.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course I have to go to job interviews.
And what do they ask you? I thought you
They look at my reel. No, they look at your reel, and they say,
you're the shit?
Luckily, a lot of times it's very nice. And, they say we really like, your reel, and I guess depending on the I'm trying to think,
Is there the general questions that come up?
At Scanline, because, see, the thing is, also working in the industry a long time, you either know somebody at the studio or something, and, like, I was going to have lunch with this guy named Bernd Angerer. And I'd worked with him at Digital Domain, and we had been friends for years, and he was a supervising animator there, and so we set up a lunch, and I said, we got to have lunch. I said, well, how about next week? And he goes, and I said, well, you want to have lunch next week? And I said, sure, but I can't Tuesday. I'm going for an interview. He goes, yeah, I know you are. It's with me.
Oh.
See, I didn't even know he was at Scanline. I mean, I think I knew he was at Scanline. I don't know, but it was weird. It was for that, it was for Iron Man, which, incidentally, when I went in there, they couldn't even tell me what I was going to be working on.
Really?
Mm-hmm. It was so top secret. They said
strange.
It was very strange because they.
Like, how do you say yes to
I
that?
don't know.
You did, though.
It was. They said. They said. I'm trying to remember what they told me about it. They said we're not allowed to say what the project is yet. It's high profile, blockbuster, blah blah blah. And I don't think they even told me it was Marvel. I don't know, but it was only after that I got the job that I could say that I was going to work on it.
Well, I guess if they said it was something to do with Marvel, you would have an idea.
I don't think they told me it was Marvel.
No? Did they say it was like a superhero movie?
No.
No?
I think they just said it was a visual effects movie involving, I don't know, action.
Surely you trusted somebody in there to know that...
Well, Barrett was the supervisor, and I knew that there was,
He was like, you're going to have fun on this one.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not even so much about that anymore. Unfortunately, there's so few places anymore. It's harder to pick and choose, just say, I don't want to work on that, and turn down work.
That's true.
So.
It's unfortunate, but it's true. So as an animator, we have a number of people over us determining... Sorry, did you finish that? Or did you have something you wanted more to say?
No.
As an animator, we have a number of people above us, like determining how your shot works out, your directors, your soups, head of character. So how do you go about adding your own creativity to a shot and putting something of yourself in there?
Oh, well, if it was back in the hand-drawn days and you're still doing cleanup animation, you could just draw something right on the frame.
That's easier, yeah.
And hide an extra finger or your girlfriend's initials or your wife's initials. Like I used to do
Easter eggs.
Yeah.
Can you tell us some?
Some. I mean, whenever there's a background shot, like a crowd shot, like I did some like crowd stuff in at a funeral in Shark Tale, right? And I have one of them look, and saying, "Hello, Lori," to my sister, mouthing it. You don't hear it.
Yeah.
Or there's I can tell you some. I'll tell you some Easter eggs later on, but no, the ones I can't say here. But I can tell you. I guess there's one in Fox and the Hound that I didn't do, and I'm not sure, but I think Don Bluth might have done it. He was very disgruntled with, or I'm not sure. I can't say for sure it was Don Bluth, but he was. Everybody was disillusioned at that point with, he was definitely with Disney.
Yeah.
And so there's a scene in the beginning of the movie where I think the old lady is scooping up the fox in her apron. She goes to lift up the baby fox, and if you look at her hand and her fingers, she's got the thing, and then you'll see her give the finger, and then finish picking up the fox. It's still in the movie.
Yeah, really?
Oh yeah, that's it.
I got so excited.
I mean, everybody knows about all the other obvious ones and the rescuers and all those other things, but that's one that a lot of people don't know about.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, she totally full on gives the finger. But I've never done anything that that bad or whatever. But no, how do you make the scene your own? I don't know. There's a million ways to do it. It all depends. I mean, if it's an all animated movie, you have much more leeway. For visual effects movie, like real a Man of Steel I worked on, and there was a whole. I mean, you just have to make it look real. There's no real way to go nuts and stray from what it needs to be. It needs to look photoreal. It needs to tell the. There's not a whole lot of acting involved in visual effects movies.
I see that's why they get into
Transformers. Transformers, you could be totally creative.
Yeah. How it came about. That's right. You had more control over how it was put together. So
but also how they acted or how they gestured. They were, a lot of them, because I worked a lot on the little guys, Wheels of Brain. And so they had personalities, much bigger personalities than the giant robots. And
you do have more leeway, don't you, when it's like a second or a tertiary character? They don't really worry about them so much.
Yeah, but also these guys they were way more expressive. They're not just big hulking masses. They were little. There were some things that, Mike Bay loved this. He loved what you did in this shot. They were all laughing, and you hear that report back, and you're like, oh, this is cool,
Yeah.
But it's never been, for me to need to express myself that much. I love to do the acting stuff, which is why I got into animation. But like I said, it's for me the illusion of making something seem alive, whether it's
that's the challenge, huh?
Just a horse running along the canyon, or
just a horse running along the canyon.
Someone emoting.
Super hard, man.
It was very hard. Very hard.
But I guess that's why they get into that spline effing thing, right? Because that's the only thing you really have control over. You heard spline effing? No?
I just used spline effing, but no, what are you talking about?
You used it about tangent
I said
effing.
pixel effing.
Pixel effing. They just polished the heck out of their shots because that's where they feel they have the most creative control over.
I don't polish the heck out of my shots.
They just turn out amazing anyway.
Yeah, no, I don't know, I look away from it when it's done. See, I've done storyboarding, and that's where you can be more creative than animation. Of course, you have to listen to the director, but you have way more input. So that's what you want to do. Then you go into storyboarding. But if you're doing animation, you can be an animation. You either make your own shorts, or you toe the line and you do what the director wants.
You gotta give it up for what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I knew early on when I signed up at Disney, people in school say things like, you want to go work for the corporation for the mouse, and hell yeah, I want to work for the mouse. They make amazing movies, and I love that stuff. But you're given a scene, and you have to get it from point A to point B, and how you do it, you have some creativity, but it's the magic of, even James Baxter, you have tremendous creativity, but the beauty is in the fact, the way he gets it from point A to point B. And how realistic it looks, and how beautifully executed, not so much that he needed to, add some sort of whimsical dance in the middle of it or something, you know what I mean?
That serves the show. Cool. So, we get to surf soap. Can you talk a little bit about how it was to work on the movie, both creatively and team-wise? I know you guys learned how to surf and stuff like that, and talk a little bit about that. And if there's something that happened on the show that, you thought was particularly fun.
I remember the day that they did bring us down there, they figured everybody should at least have the opportunity to learn how to surf, just so we could get it in our heads, what it takes to surf and all that. And Zoe Deschanel was down there. No idea who she was at the time. You might still not know who she is.
I do. She's on a TV show back home in Ireland.
Right, but she was never, she wasn't that famous at all.
She's a really nice voice.
Very cute voice. And they had, I forget who the surfers were, a bunch of professional surfers down there. And But Shia LaBeouf came around, and so that was all fun and cool, and in fact, a couple of my friend Han in particular, ended up just falling in love with surfing so much just from that one day. Han Solo?
No, Hans. Who? Hans?
Don't say Hans Bacher.
You gotta say who it is. Hans who?
Daeho Han. He's Korean.
Oh, okay.
There's not a chance you would ever know who he is. He's a rigger. Good friend of mine. And anyway, hey Han. Since he's now up in ILM. You better leave that in, Han Solo. So anyway, he loved it so much he ended up buying a surfboard like the next week. And going down there. I don't even tell you things he sacrificed to go surfing after that. It was crazy. But working on the movie was so fun. See, I'm not a surfer per se, barely a skateboarder, but
you skateboard?
Yeah, but I not to any degree that all these kids do now. But the thing was, we used a lot of skateboard moves in the movie. Because surfing moves, in general, aren't that dynamic. So every time they wanted something really dynamic, I would go to a skateboard move. Something called an ollie, and I forget what the terms are now, but I have Tank sliding along the top of the wave, and that's nothing you could do but you could do it in skateboarding all day long, which is what I did. And that was, I guess, where you could say I could use my creativity. So yeah, when we were doing the surfing shots, we substituted a lot of those for skateboarding shots. And in fact, one of them, when he's flipping over Tank after he wipes out and all that, I used I was just scanned the YouTube for something that looked cool, and I ended up with a kneeboard thing, a guy being pulled behind a boat.
That's when they're going to call it Maverick, right?
Yeah, exactly. And he spun up over the thing and did this maneuver, and I came up with that from, and that's one I had to thumbnail out because it was kind of complicated. And I really wished I would have come up with a name, because the directors asked me, they loved it, and they said, what do you call that? move. And I could have named it.
Oh,
I didn't realize it at the time. I said, I call it the, I could have, some code word I could have used, or my wife's nickname, the Stanzi, or the, something, clever like that. But I didn't understand why they asked me. I said, I don't know, I just saw it, a kneeboard thing from the internet. And they called it the friggin' Maverick. And I was like, son of a bitch. They could have used my...
Yeah, I know. I thought it was a good opportunity to put something in there, too, rather than just the Maverick. But, it is what it is.
Idea.
Do you want to tell us some of your shots that you worked on?
Tons of surfing shots. A lot of them with Cody surfing and Tank. To both of those guys, a lot of them. When we were actually... Here's the thing that many people probably wouldn't realize, or you might not even know, and it actually went the same way in Tron, is you animate the vehicles first, in this case a surfboard, on a wave, which is like nothing like the wave you see in the movie. It's a blend shape in a big blue solid clay-looking thing that we could control and manipulate to some degree this blend shape wave. But we had to take the surfboard and have it had to physically work that it carved the surface.
Yeah.
It couldn't cheat because we had a silver ribbon that was generated behind it, which would represent the wake of the board.
Right.
And if the board were to go sideways, or what we call crabbing, if it crabbed as it rode, you would see the trail coming out this way instead of...
Oh, we better explain this for radio.
Yeah, I'm trying to. So you couldn't crab because it would look like the wake was coming out at a skewed angle, at a very weird...
So it's coming out from the side of it, as opposed to the back of it?
It could have been from the side, or it had to come from the back.
It had to
look
come from the
like...
correct spot.
Exactly, and you had to animate it correctly. You couldn't cheat it. You couldn't cheat the boards. It might look great, carving all over the place across the wave, but as soon as you turn on that thing to generate the trail, the wake, the silver ribbon would come out behind it that we got to see, and you could see it coming out from like a skewed angle that was wrong, and you realized, so you really had to dig in with both edges of the board, and it had to be accurate. And then after you got your board to work, then you threw the character on top of it and made it look like the character was the one that was initiating the turns, so you kind of had to animate it in reverse.
Backwards, that's cool.
A lot of it, too, is once you see the scene come up on screen, if there's a wake behind it, it had to be pre-rolled or generated 200 or so frames ahead of time. So that means you had to do, especially in Tron we did this, with the light jets and the light cycles, when they first appear on screen, if there's a ribbon on the screen, behind, anywhere on the screen, it had to have been generated by this. So that means we did like maybe 200 frames of animation you'll never see for every shot.
Oh my god. And you animated it?
Just to make the ribbon be correct.
It wasn't great animation, right?
It still had to be correct. No, it still had to work,
Bloody hell.
Because otherwise it wouldn't generate properly. So it was crazy.
And so then the waves, they worked towards your animation?
No, we did. The waves were their own. We could manipulate the wave to some degree, but once it was what we wanted, you didn't touch it, and you animated on top of that with the boards, and then the characters. You
animate the boards, you animate the character, you get the wave working, like the actual sim, and then you got to go back in with the animation and make that work to sim?
No. Once what we were looking at, like I said, was a big blue blob blend shape. Nothing like water. It was, and then somehow they took that thing and cashed out its, I don't know if it was a point cloud or what kind of a cache they did. Somehow they worked in the effects department, worked the magic and made it look like real water. I have no idea how they did it.
You didn't have to go back
with
into
the spray,
animation.
No.
Wow.
No, whatever we ended up with, they took and it never worked the other way around, where they would do some sort of spectacular wave crash, and then we had to. That was all. No, we did it on our end first.
Cool. Well, we're getting close to the end. You got to go home to dinner. So I wanted to find out what your favorite part of the animation process was, and if you could talk us through your workflow.
Okay.
Because you were talking earlier, I thought we'd come back to it. So.
Yeah. My favorite part of the animation process. Interesting. I don't think I've ever been asked that question, or
really?
even thought about it.
Woo! First podcast and the first question you've ever been asked. That's great.
Yeah, favorite part of the animation process.
Yeah.
Wow.
20 minutes later, people, you can just fast forward.
No, I'm trying to think if I'm talking. Are we going to talk about traditional? So I guess it would be.
Well, you can do traditional, and then your favorite part of CG, whichever, both maybe, since you don't want to go home.
Well, I guess All right, let's see. Usually they say what type of characters or what type of animation, but in the whole process, if I'm talking about traditional animation, it's definitely doing the key poses. Nobody likes in between or that. So figuring out, what the character's doing and how it's behaving and acting. So, blending that in going now into CG animation.
You're getting the personality in there?
Yeah, I think acting. I know that when I've been doing some visual effects movies for a while. Then when I got into Transformers, I forgot how much fun it was to be free to do acting again, and be expressive and gestural, and so I think that might be my favorite part.
The acting part, just getting in there.
But then there's certain things that you're so proud of yourself on. You look back on a shot you did that's like, how in the world did I ever pull that off? Something like physical, like in G.I. Joe, where the guy had to climb up this truck and jump and dive off the back of the thing, and cars are flying at him, and he's spinning around, and it was just physically demanding as anything to try and figure all this out physically, but in my head. And then when you see it, that's really satisfying. Yeah, I mean, any of the stuff that's physics-based, if it looks real in the end, that's a thrill. Working on it is a pain, though. So I don't know if that's my favorite part. I can't say that would be it. When it's done, yes.
And then when you get into CG, since it's the main keys in 2D, is it blocking in CG that you like the most?
In CG?
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying. No. I guess that wouldn't be the same thing. I think it would just be when you get past your first or second pass of
what would be
animation.
your second pass for you?
Of course, you have blocking, and that gets
When
bought
it's all
off
working.
on. Yeah, it's all working and blocking, and then you go to your second pass. Now you're starting to really get into the nuances of the performance. I think that's probably some of the most fun stuff.
Yeah, that's when it starts to come real.
Yeah.
To come together.
Yeah, and it's working within the sequence, and you're like, oh, thank God, I finally got this this working.
Yeah.
You asked about workflow.
Yeah. You got a good memory. I'd have forgotten that.
Very simply, I approach it like I did as a traditional animator, where I even refer to, after being in my class, I refer to the images as drawings most of the time.
Yeah.
So if you have your drawing or your keyframe,
your pose.
Yeah, your pose, your key pose, which it's basically your storytelling poses, if you will. Once you have those kind of worked out, I work on 5s and 10s when I'm blocking everything out. So I'll put a key on frame 1, and then one on frame 5, and then 10, 15, 20, whatever. I'll skip around, but usually increments of 5, just for rough timing.
Okay.
I'll do rough timing on 5s.
Okay.
That usually works out really well for me. And so when I'm blocking everything out and figuring, watching the poses, I always work in linear. That's what my presets are set at, so that I'm able to scrub along the timeline as I'm creating, and I'm blocking in, even in my blocking phase. Overlap, I'm blocking in, definitely drag, and always arcs as well. I'm watching my arcs, even in my blocking pass.
They're kind of rough, though, but you're still getting them in there, or you really...
That way I can make sure, like, if a character is standing, and let's say it's a cartoony movement, and it needs to, zip to another pose, I can see where that arc needs to go. So I'll put in my breakdown in the blocking pose. And if I'm scrubbing, I can see it. If you're in stepped, you can't do that. So I don't work in stepped. So I'll scrub through just like I used to do when I roll my drawings. I'm scrubbing back and forth all the time to see and making changes. So then once I have the key poses and my breakdowns or extreme keys or extreme breakdowns. Breakdowns determine your...
Yeah, I was going to say, can you explain? Because they can be complicated to understand.
You have your key poses, and again, a key pose could be basically if something's going to change direction, or otherwise, refer to it could be your storytelling pose. But your breakdowns determine how you get from point A to point B. Like if you're going to reach out and grab a doorknob, which way is the arc going to go? So you're determining your arcs with your breakdowns, and you're also determining starting to set up your spacing with your breakdowns. So depending on where you put between the two key poses, where you're putting this thing called a breakdown, where you position that is vitally important, almost more important for good animation than keys can be, because it's helping to determine not only your timing, but definitely your spacing and your arcs. So building those things in instead of waiting till later after you put all these key poses and said, oh well, now I need some what we call breakdowns or in between. If you do that later, you're just gonna be wasting a lot of time trying to make that work. But if I'm doing my my blocking and I'm building those things in, then I already know.
It gets you that much faster. Huh?
Exactly, really fast.
Yeah.
And so then after that,
don't look at me like, wow, kind of have an idea what you're doing.
Once you pass that, you continue to add drawings, if you will, between those. And if, let's say, I'm blocking something out and I've now, had a movement go from frame 1 to whatever, 36 or 5 or whatever. If I'm still animating on 5s.
We picked the wrong.
That's only the second jet in this whole thing. So
that's true.
Not bad. Almost gotten sideswiped a few times by old ladies in the parking lot.
Yeah, it's true.
So, anyway, once you're, so I'll just keep chipping away at this movement and adding in-betweens, and keying all, by the way, in each one of these so I can adjust timing a little bit later.
Every control on the character.
Basically, every control I'm going to use, or all controls, which isn't a big deal. I don't worry about messy graph editors or any of that stuff. But basically, then I start to try and get it down as close as I can to being animated on 2s. In other words, I'll have something that I've created a key pose for, or I say key, but not a key pose, but
like an actual drawing.
A drawing, yeah, one that I've set a key on. Maybe on at least maybe every 4th frame, if not try to get down to 2. So that by the time I get that far, and I haven't even opened the graph editor really, except for gross movements, like if I really need to adjust something, in a major way, maybe I'll grab a whole section of something and tweak it. But I really haven't opened the graph editor at that point. Then when I finally do start to add ease in and ease out, all of my overlap, my drag, definitely like follow through, I have created that myself in the workspace. In other words, if I have a character that's going to point at something, you have the key that the arm is up by the shoulder and that it extends out to what would be the extreme, the pointing position.
Yeah.
But then you have the settle, the recoil that comes back.
Yeah.
Well, you have this bit of overshoot as it goes beyond, what the point is into the settle, and that bit that goes beyond, some people might go into the graph editor and grab that, whatever axis that is, and make it go beyond and bend those things like rubber bands, and that's really unpredictable. I'd rather create a breakdown extreme out there, and then bring it back. So once I get it down to that, when I'm adding the ease in and ease out, if you use the auto tangent, which I'm obviously a big fan of also, or plateau or whichever one, but never go from just hit spline all, because you'll end up going back in.
Yeah, it'll end up like it's swimming.
The other thing I don't use is I use non-weighted tangents. In other words, I can't grab the tangent handles and stretch and pull them. To me, it's a big waste of time. Unless you have something like a very sharp, specific motion where something's going to smack into something and bounce off of it, like if a brick is going to hit something, or you need really something, I guess it would be super snappy. Then you might need to break the tangent handle so that when it goes into the key, it's completely different than the way it exits the key. But that's rare.
Yeah, I'm using them a lot less myself now. I think just wanting more control over it, rather than.
Yeah, because I used to just draw everything, and when I started letting the computer, the less I let the computer do for me, the better.
So when you have this down on 4s and 2s and stuff like that, and you're going back into refining your animation, or maybe that's refined probably at your level, it probably is looking pretty awesome. Do you go back in and delete unnecessary keys?
Yeah,
like your
sometimes.
What's your polish base then?
I don't need to go back and delete unnecessary keys or clean up the graph editor if it's working.
So you've already worked in beauty paths at like the level of 2 keys?
Yeah, kind of, sort of. Because basically by then, all right, there is a part, of course, in the middle of that where I've adjusted timing, and the timings have changed. I've started to break things off into individual body parts so that the arm is, now separate from, and I'm no longer keying everything down the whole way. But I do need to...
You just ran over that. I'm like, what? What? How did you do that? Like...
Because... It's kind of an organic process, unfortunately, to try and describe. But if I have my key poses set up, where I've keyed the whole body and everything, there might be certain instances where I decide that, well, the arm needs to be doing something a little bit different, and I'll start to break that off from the other stuff. And if I needed to go back in and change, basically all my major timing, it better be right by the time I start to split things off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if it isn't, you're screwed.
Yeah.
The only way to fix that is to go back in and key everything, which I do sometimes. You go back in and key all wherever there's a key. Like if they say I put a key on the wrist, but there was no key on anything else, but I decided I needed to move it on this one frame. And then I keyed the foot over here, whatever. If things don't have a key on all controls, like if every frame doesn't have a key, I'll have to actually go back in and do that. And here's the thing. Maybe this is my own method, I don't know, but I'll go in and I'll actually look at the frame, and if it barely moves, I'll just delete everything.
Yeah,
everything around it is keyed. If it barely moves, and I'll find the ones that have something that's actually moving, and then I'll start to do the surgery from there.
Right.
That's after I've already, if I need to go back in and key all again for some reason. But like I said, the majority of your timing and movement, mostly timing, should be done before before you start to spread everything out and offset things, as it were.
Yeah, you offset then.
Yeah, but I don't make it a conscious effort to say, well, now I need to offset everything.
Yeah.
It's never that way.
It's intuitive.
It's always if it needs to be, because a lot of times, just like I said with, that if basically things start moving from the hips on up. So if you have the hips and then the spine and then the shoulders and neck, head, or whatever, all those things need to work together. So generally they're going to have kind of a similar timing.
Yeah. So
it's a matter of how you have created the look of the spine. If it's going to reverse C, or whatever. But because you can get those things the hard way by offsetting the spine. Take the lower spine and then move that from one frame, and then take the next one up and move it off to one frame, and then the next one, and you could get those reverse C shape, or you can just key all and reverse C and make your gestures work for you. I don't know if that makes any sense. It's impossible to try and describe this
No,
stuff.
I was listening to a podcast before that they were describing polishing. When I first listened to it, I was like, what in the name of God? And then after years and years and years of doing your own work and getting to know what exactly things are, you start to make sense. So it made sense to me, and I'm sure after many, many listens and much practice, people will get it.
They better.
Well, we're at the end, Keith.
No!
Thank you so much for spending so much time. It's been really amazing. You spent a lot more than we suspected to spend. You gave some great answers. Long-winded.
Thank you. And I really, I just wanted to ask you one question.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you after me, Lucky Charms? No. It's been a pleasure, and I'm very honored to be your very first podcast.
It's a pleasure to have you.
Hope there's some stuff you can use in here.
Yeah, absolutely. We did have that ad, the Lucky Charms ad, back in Ireland.
Did you?
Yeah.
I worked on those.
No way!
For years.
No way!
I was Lucky Charms guy and...
oh my God!
And the Tricks Rabbit.
Ah,
Do you know the Tricks Rabbit?
I do. I worked with Chuck Gamage, and he done those, some of those ads too. I love them. They got shown in Ireland as well.
Really?
They were amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
For years, I worked
God.
at a studio called Calabash doing that, traditional animation.
Jeez, dude.
They still do them.
But you worked everywhere.
Yeah, well, that was just a fun thing, man. And the funny thing about that, I grew up with the Lucky Charms Rabbit, and I grew up with Lucky Charms and the Tricks Rabbit. And what was funny is that I didn't grow up with Pocahontas. I didn't grow up with Hunchback. I didn't grow up with Mulan. So I didn't know these characters. But I knew these Tricks characters. So when I worked on those, that was more thrilling to me.
Yeah, of course.
Which was really weird.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm drawing the Tricks Rabbit. I was a little kid when this came out.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
As a closing, do you have any great piece of advice that somebody ever gave to you that you found really helped you in your animation career? You might as well mention the name of the person. Give them some props.
Draw or draw not. There is no try. Well, that's what
Oh,
Elliot...
God, I thought you were asking me a question there.
That's what Elliot told me. Is there any great...
Elliot who?
Elliot Bohr.
Okay.
B-O-U-R. I don't know if there's any great advice. My own advice, it would just be, just don't give up, man. I am the shining example of, you can succeed if you believe it. And there was plenty of times when I didn't think that I could, I was like, am I ever going to get this right? Because I wasn't sure if I was, could draw well enough.
Yeah.
And fortunate for animators nowadays, you don't have to really be able to draw that well, or at all. So I think just be tenacious and definitely take whatever shot you have and make it, whether it's the smallest little thing, because I've seen animators get indignant when they're given a crowd shot or a nothing shot where it's boogermation where the character is so small, and they just turn their nose up at it and kind of just. But if you take it like it's the greatest shot in the world, you're gonna go farther.
Yeah.
I've seen it all the time.
That's cool. It's been awesome. You might tell us what car you've got, because this is gorgeous.
We're sitting here in my souped-up Mustang GT.
You own a lot of cars.
I got some cars, but and I have a life-size R2D2.
I know.
And Chewbacca and C-3PO, and I'm a big Star Wars nerd, obviously.
Yeah.
And I have 5 dogs.
Hi, doggies. Cassie is the.
Cassie.
Yeah, I remember Cassie. She
Yeah,
was cuffing up a fur ball.
2-Bit.
Nice.
And Cassie, and Taryn, and TC, and Tabin. Did I get them all?
Aw.
Cassie, Taryn, TC, Tabin, 2-Bit. Yeah. And my wife, Connie. Hi, Connie.
That's sweet. Thanks so much, Kate. It's been
You're
great.
very welcome.
Peace.